What is the mind-body problem? In this video, I'm going to answer that question. To answer that question, I'm going to talk about the famous philosopher Rene Descartes. I'm also going to give you 3 theories that are related to the mind-body problem. So you'll also in this video learn dualism, idealism, and physicalism. Sounds like a lot. Let's focus on this. Mind-body. The mind-body problem in philosophy gets at the difficulty with which we can describe how these two things are connected and how these two things act on each other. Act on each other? Let's break that down. Your mind acts on your body, right? So if I said, okay, person watching this YouTube video, raise your right hand. You can decide to ignore me, or you can raise your hand. And if you raise your right hand, you might go like this, but how did you do that? How did you think, okay, I'll raise my right hand, and then all of a sudden your physical body started moving? How can your mind act on your body? In other words, how can you think something and then there's a physical movement based on that thought? Your thought is acting on, controlling the body. And sometimes the reverse happens. The body acts on the mind. If you go, I don't know, something crazy, licking the floor or something, you're doing something with your body. You're putting bacteria in it. And then you can get sick where all of a sudden you can't think, you can't focus, you feel like you can't breathe, you can't do your work, you are ill. Physical things are acting on how you mentally exist, your mental well-being. How is it possible that the mind and the body interact? The body acts on the mind and the mind acts on the body. How is it possible that these two interact at all? That's the basic question. And the mind-body problem is how difficult it is to give a satisfactory answer to that question. Let me show you why that's a really hard thing to tackle. Let's think about mind and body and how they are so different. Think about it this way. When you think about what the mind is, it's the same kind of thing as the thinking stuff that happens. Its soul, its spirit, its idea, its thought, its mind, all of these things are incorporeal. All of these things are incorporeal things. And when you think about what incorporeal means, it means the opposite of body. Body is something that is corporeal. Corporeal comes from this Latin, from corpus, meaning has mass or takes up space. It's extended in space. Your body and the sensible things about you and your sense perceptions and your materials and the matter and the mass, all of that kind of thing is corporeal. But your mind and your thoughts and your ideas and your soul and your spirits are all incorporeal. They are not physical. Think about the difference between these kinds of things and these kinds of things. Now, you're a human being. You have mass. You have matter. Matter makes you up. You are made of materials. You have sense perceptions that can interact with the physical world. All of this stuff is physical stuff. A part of you is physical. But there's another part of you, isn't there, that's not physical? Like your mind or your thoughts or your ideas or your soul or your spirit. This kind of stuff does not take up space, does not have mass, it's not extended, doesn't have a weight. So here are, in these 2 columns, 2 totally different kinds of things. And the mind-body problem asks how it's possible that the thing that is not in space, like the thinking that you can do, can interact with the part of you that is in space. Here is a question that comes from the subfield in philosophy called metaphysics. What is real? And there are lots of different answers that people have given in philosophy. Idealism is the view that when you're thinking about what is really real in reality, it is only incorporeal stuff, mind, thought, soul, spirit stuff, that physical things are not really real. Think of them as an illusion, like Maya if you're a Buddhist. On the opposite side of this spectrum is the view called physicalism. Physicalism is the view that only corporeal things are really real. Incorporeal things, like your soul or spirit or your mind, that stuff's not really real. It's all reducible to physical things. Physicalism is the view that only physical things are really real. And somewhere in the middle, I know this is not to scale, somewhere in the middle is the idea of dualism, which is the view that both dual things exist, that fundamentally in reality there are both incorporeal things that exist like ideas or souls and material things in space that exist like any physical object. So that's idealism versus dualism versus physicalism. And if you've read Thomas Nagel's article, What Is It Like to Be a Bat? Thomas Nagel is trying to argue against physicalism by pointing to the subjective character of one's experience that he calls consciousness. So here are these three views. And these three views are three different answers to the question in metaphysics, what is real? And maybe you're going to have to make an assumption here that the mind is real, there are mental things, and that the body is real, there are physical things. Without making that assumption, it doesn't make sense to ask for a solution to the mind-body problem. Somebody who is an idealist will say there is no mind-body problem because everything that exists is incorporeal. Somebody who's a physicalist will say there is no mind-body problem because everything that exists is physical. If you believe that in reality there are both dual, incorporeal things that exist and also corporeal things that exist, now you have the mind-body problem. Now you have to explain, how is it possible that something which is totally unlike the body could affect the body? Like, how do they connect? French philosopher René Descartes wrote a book called Meditations on First Philosophy. And in Meditations 1 and 2, he does a number of things. He says that he is going to doubt everything that he cannot believe beyond a reasonable doubt. He is going to doubt everything that is at all doubtable, and then he is going to start from scratch, and he's going to rebuild his mind only with beliefs that are not doubtable. And so he doubts everything, including whether he is alive, whether he is awake. He gives the dream argument, he gives the evil demon argument, and he's asking very basic questions like, how can I prove that this is not a dream? How can I prove that I am really alive? How can I prove that this is really true? And what he does is prove that he exists from the fact that he is thinking, I think, therefore I exist, or cogito ergo sum, from the fact that he is questioning whether he is being duped by some evil demon, and from the fact that he is wondering if he is awake or dreaming, he proves that he must exist as a thinking thing. And from there to the end of Meditation 6, what he does is prove that he has a body and that he can know things and that God exists. And here's what one of his main critics says. The body is physical. We can agree with that, right? The body is physical. If the mind or the soul, whatever in you that you think is the thing that moves your body, call it whatever you want from here. If the mind or the soul can determine or can move or can control the body, then the soul or mind or whatever you're calling it must be physical. And Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia writes to René Descartes in criticism of what he writes in Meditations on First Philosophy, saying this and explaining that she doesn't understand how it could be possible that the mind or the soul or the spirit being non-physical, how could it interact with something physical? If the mind is controlling the body and the body is in space, then the mind must also be in space. If the mind is in space, then it must be physical. How can the mind have effects on the body? How can the body have effects on the mind? They're totally fundamentally different things. How can they be connected and control the other one?